Emily, a good spellers, of course.
Yeah, I saw that too.
All in one person, written there for grade 5, and Emily was second, I think. Nice. Written spelling. Yeah, something.
Is there a problem, Mike? If you have a question, share. Because you're going to encounter places in this study where I have written criticism in the notes, in the margins of my book. Not of the confessions themselves, but of the editor's notes. For example, when we get to the formula of Concord, one of the editor's notes expounds how man can make no law where God has not written one. There's nothing wrong with that. What happens next is the editor goes on to say, but Walther did say that we shouldn't change our worship forms ever. So there's a little marginal note, might be slightly sarcastic, that says, let no man make laws for you. Unless, of course, it's Walther. I am not above sarcasm. I don't know if you've noticed this yet.
Oh, I know there's a faction of the Missouri Senate that's kind of getting into a lot of high church legalism, and I wondered if maybe.
Yeah, you're right. To put it the way one of the pastors who was covering the vacancy over at Christ Lutheran put it, when I was interrogating them as to their orthodoxy, there are a number of pastors in the Missouri Synod who would be more comfortable in the Roman Catholic Church. There are a number of pastors in the Missouri Synod who would be more comfortable in the LCA. But 80 to 85% of them would be largely indistinguishable from me.
Oh, what percent?
80 to 85%.
That's good.
That might be a little generous, but the point stands. Which is why I always, when they get a new person over there, they get a orthodoxy interrogation. I told her to leave her hot poker at home.
What happened?
There's much higher incidence of struggles amongst kids than there were when I was a kid. And a large part of me wonders how environmental that is if we're doing something with our diet or screen time or something that is. You think 100%?
Pretty close.
I think it,
What kids have issues nowadays so much.
yeah, I'm wondering how much of it is something we're doing wrong. Not on purpose, but.
It wouldn't do on purpose. There's some speculation, I don't know how widespread or where I heard this even, that ultrasound is used much more frequently these days.
And screwing with their brain chemistry in
That's
utero,
the question.
possible. I don't have answers, but it wasn't like this when you were kids. And I don't blame the parents or the children. something's happening that we're missing. And it's not just here. I've seen it over there extensively.
Over there at,
China.
And the only difference is here, we are programmed to help the children. They're there. They consider it a personal failing, a weakness, and 86 the kids.
that won't help the problem.
It does not. You haven't quite lived till 3-year-olds throwing a chair at you, though. Anyway, the Augsburg Confession, I handed out not only the confession, but a bunch of introductory material, because a lot of this stuff, for me, well, we've covered this extensively in the 12 years I studied to be a pastor. You have not studied for 12 years to be a pastor. And so I'm imagining a lot of this was brand new to you, right? Any questions on the historical background I handed out with you, with the confession itself? Does it need to be a question? A reaction is acceptable as well.
I was like, reading the history of it, it just shows how God had to finally step in, or the gospel was lost.
Yep. And had to pick the right time too. Because it had to be at a point in time where it was accessible to get the gospel into the hands of normal people. Not just the highly educated who spend their time reading things. Your average farmer, your average worker didn't have time to sit around and read through about 300 pages of Tom Clancy's novel Red Storm Rising, which is not autobiographical at all. And Zeke was sick this weekend, so while he laid on the couch, I read a book. And I chose that book because I had gone to the Sack Museum over in Ashland last weekend. And walking around there, you can't help but think, what if? And the book, Red Storm Rising, is basically, oh, here's a scenario that could have played out. Also, there are a couple fantastic barbecue restaurants in Ashland.
I read that they have a new display of things that I thought you would be excited about. I didn't realize that Anderson was the CEO of that museum. Astronaut Anderson.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
That's what the lawyer said. Could they be wrong?
Newspaper being wrong, unheard of. Anyway, that particular Cold War era history has a special fascination for me. Anyway, so I had a little bit of time to watch a sick boy be sick and read a book. He's fine now. He just had some sort of bug that he needed to bounce back. So, yeah. you guys can sit around and read a book if you feel like it. The peasants, the workers of the 15th and 16th century had no such luxury. So they needed God's word to be put in their hands, first of all. Gutenberg's printing press took care of that. And they needed it to be in a language that they could understand. Their understanding of Latin, well, let's put it this way, your understanding of Latin dwarfs theirs. And I'm not even talking about you, Rachel. I know you studied it briefly.
Oh, I did study.
But you guys know more Latin than you realize. They, however, did not. When they went to church, everything was in Latin. You know how when you were kids, there were people who would say the King James Version is the authentic English version and you can't change it because it comes directly from God? There's still some people saying that. Drives me insane. I mean, seriously. The King James Version isn't even a great translation. The Greek and Hebrew scholars of England were nowhere near the quality that the Greek and Hebrew scholars of Europe were. Luther could have Greeked and Hebrewed circles around those people. But the King James, it's a passable translation. But it's not, well, this is the next best thing to the inspired writers themselves, which is something you will hear from time to time, including roughly 2 hours away.
I liked it.
What?
I liked it.
You're allowed to. I'm never using it in church though.
Didn't ask you to.
What are you talking about?
King James.
Oh,
Yeah,
I see what you mean.
yeah, I'm never gonna use it in church. And if you ask me to, the answer would be a hard no, and that'd be the end of the
I
conversation.
didn't ask.
No, I wouldn't expect you to. Let me rephrase, I wouldn't expect you to.
What I remember from Latin was, we hadn't gotten too far into it. I think we didn't have it till we were seniors, so we just had 1 year. But my Catholic friends, and there were several in the class, oh, that's what the priest has been saying.
Yeah,
All their,
the church I grew up in, went to school in, was right next door to a Catholic church. Like, I mean, spitball distance. And that church retained the Latin Mass. When my church moved to a bigger, newer church, the Catholic church next door bought our church to open a seminary focused exclusively on the Latin Mass.
and that was in what year? 70s?
Sweetie, I wasn't alive in the 70s.
Oh,
My parents hadn't met for most of the 70s.
well, some of us.
I turned 40 last year.
Okay. So that's recent times that this happened.
Yeah, around the year 2000 or so.
A Latin seminary,
Yes.
so they haven't given up.
Not everybody has. They ought to, but
Well, none of us sitting here now would believe in Jesus if we hadn't learned it from the King James Version, which is what we had at the
It's what you had. It was a passable translation.
very past. Yes.
Based on which Greek and Hebrew lessons are you saying that?
Don't get her started.
Yeah.
Regret.
You act like this hasn't been a war I've walked through several times. I can show you my battle scars if you like. But,
Well, I'm
I
not
think that
saying it's
generation
the
had to
best.
study what all
But I
King
wouldn't
James
put it down.
meant, and so it meant something to them, just like you
Right.
studied Greek and stuff, so a
I,
different version means something to you, where King James, where they studied it, means a lot to them.
no, that's, and I understand that. It's, like I said, passable.
I know when I went through catechism, they had to explain a lot of things. To understand what King James was talking about.
Yeah,
Now,
there-
to do, it's
There's a language barrier because even at the time it was written in older language. Like in 1610, when it came out, people would go, well, that's a little dated. Yes?
Since God gave a warning on changing his message, hopefully it's largely the same in many aspects.
Where it differs, it's been improved on. For example, what is the root of all evil?
Love of money.
Nope,
A love of money.
Not quite.
Heart.
Oh, it's,
the King James translates, the love of money is the root of all evil, which is probably the third place translation for what the Greek actually says. The better by far is love of money is a root of evil.
Is what?
A root,
No.
one of them, and not of all evil. All evil stems from one of three things, basically. Lust, greed, or pride. Think of the sins you've committed. But those are the big three roots of evil, right? Those are the big three roots of sin. But the love of money is the root. Well, grammatically possible in Greek doesn't fit with the rest of the context of Scripture. I've had to pull out Greek in Bible studies before to make my point. Shall I do it again?
Let's gird our loins
Now,
and
let's
go
get
on.
Sounds good. All right. So what's the point of the Augsburg Confession?
That's the heresies of at that time, what the Catholic Church was, gearing away from the true word.
Spoken like a good Lutheran. But I don't think Luther would say that was the point. Well, he might, but he might put it a little bit different way. To defend the truths that he had been teaching. This wasn't an attack. This was a defense. The way you phrase it was a bit more on the attack end, right? And there is attack that is part of any good defense because you need to fight back against whoever's attacking you. But the Augsburg Confession wasn't meant as an offensive weapon. It was a defensive weapon. Does that make sense? This was the shield, not the sword. Luther had plenty of sword to him, but this wasn't it. Is this, I'm seeing frowns.
I tried to.
No, not from you. I saw the headline on you, so I knew you got it, but
Not ready to wear my hat. My wife's father.
others were frowning, so. Why would the Augsburg Confession start with the teaching of God?
Well, to establish who God is, the true God. There's so many ideas about God. I remember reading them here, but it's been a few days now.
That's okay. You're saying you didn't memorize the historical aspects of what I have? Read on.
No.
Come on. To be honest, I just briefly glanced through the history myself. The point of the Augsburg Confession is to lay out the key differences, the key areas where Lutherans and Catholics disagree, right? And also, to a lesser extent, to show how they were different from other reforms, such as Zwingli and Calvin. Calvin wasn't quite in the picture yet, as a major player at least, but Zwingli at the very least. Because Marburg and Torgau had already taken place. So, why start with what? Look at Article 1, if you would. Just read through it to yourself. If I handed you my book, would it help you at all, Myron?
Is it big print?
No.
She read it to me through the week here.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember, but I think my eyes will fuzz out of it. Sometimes I gotta look out the focus.
Yeah, that
distance.
I know, but I just thought I'd offer if it helped. The copy she's holding comes directly from my book, so.
I can't wait till our Bible gets a big print.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometime get 2 beers in me and I'll explain what's happening there. I said sometime get 2 beers in me and I'll explain to you what's happening there.
My ears, my eyes, and just kind of fall apart.
Yeah, happens to the best of us. That floppy disk thing, though, that was amazing. Thank you for that. The flappy disks?
The what?
Flappy disks?
Oh.
For the angle grinder?
Oh.
Thank you.
So that works.
Oh, amazingly well.
Yep.
Can't tell I made mistakes anymore. So, why begin the Augsburg Confession with a teaching about God?
Why not? But it seems like that's where it has to begin.
That's a starting point.
Why? Why are you saying what you're saying? I'm not arguing with you, I'm asking you to.
Some people don't believe in the triune God.
True, but who was the Augsburg Confession written to?
Charles.
Charles the Emperor, the Pope, etc., etc. Why establish the Lutheran belief and teaching about God?
So let them know that we believe in the true God. I mean, they believe in a Trinity, the Trinity also.
So they're establishing common ground.
You want to stay alive?
Well, if you're a heathen, why would they even listen to you?
Right, they're establishing common ground. We're not different. We're not insane. We're not coming up with things that no one else has ever heard of. We're saying some of the same things you guys say. In fact, the most foundational belief, who God is, we actually share that. We believe in who God is the same way they do. There's no disputing that. Where the dispute comes in isn't who God is, but what God does. That's where the disagreement lies. And now the philosophers among you say, how can you divide who God is from what he does? And you are technically correct. But this is a good place to start. Why would you want to establish common ground with someone you're going to spend the rest of your paper arguing with?
So you don't get killed.
Good way to start out.
Hey, you're going to get killed either way. People have been burned for far less than this.
Well, I think you want to establish it, we gotta, the word, and that's what we gotta base things on, is the word, so you had a basis to argue, or, point out his differences.
Good Lutheran answer. But you're arguing with people who don't view the word as the sole ruling principle of belief. You're arguing with people who would argue that tradition and the Pope speaking ex cathedra is equal to God's own word. You answered like a good Lutheran. They weren't writing to good Lutherans. What was Luther's goal?
To reform.
To reform, not start something new. For example, if I wanted to correct some sort of misunderstanding or misappropriation that you guys had, would I start by talking about the intricacies of the Chinese language?
No.
Because your eyes would glaze over in a heartbeat, right? Or if Myron, guess what? You're a heretic right
Do that once
there. Yeah, but if I could find a way to use an illustration to Myron from woodworking or farming or something like that, he's probably more apt to listen to me, right? Because I'm talking about something he knows, something he understands, something that resonates clearly with him. I can establish a certain level of understanding and then move on to show what's wrong.
We're more immune to understanding, correct?
Yeah. With the Lutherans here, they're starting with something no one would argue with to show that we're not so different, you and I. We are the same on these things. Therefore, when we say you're wrong here, here, and here, this is not coming from some insane person. This is coming from someone who is very similar to you and wants to correct instead of condemn. Do you see the point? So that's why you begin with God. And the list of heresies that they condemn has the same idea. This is the positive and the negative. On the positive side, here's what we believe. Sounds a lot like what you believe, right? Here's the heresies that we condemn. Sounds a lot like the heresies you condemn, right? We are starting from the most basic fundamental point on the exact same page. Therefore, you can take seriously what follows. If I told you that God was a giant lizard with a volcano for a mouth that will one day come and consume the world, his name is Zorp, you would go,
A good Democrat? I just had to throw that out.
it's kind of interesting. The guy who was the president of my congregation, Broken Bow, up until a couple of weeks ago, is a Democrat. So I was just about the perfect person to short circuit any political arguments. Because, well, that's in the middle. No, here's where you're wrong. No, here's where you're wrong. Shut up. And then anyway, so take a look at Article 2. I want you to focus especially on the very last paragraph of that article.
Look to yourselves for your salvation, as far as Rome is concerned.
Ah, so it was a veiled accusation, wasn't it? The rest of the Augsburg Confession will go on to build a case out from here that the Romans are at very least semi-Pelagian. Pelagius was someone who said you could save yourself. Rome would not go that far. Rome would not tell you that you need to save yourself and you can only do it by yourself. They would acknowledge at least some help from God. However, what Luther and Melanchthon are saying here is, remember that heresy you guys condemned? You're doing that now. That is the point of that paragraph. It builds out from here, but you can see the veil line started to get drawn. Article 1 was establishing common ground. Article 2 starts to establish where we are different. Is there anything in these two articles that you wish was spelled out more clearly?
Well, I did have one question, if, just kind of reading this. After all these boundaries on both sides were in the open, did, the Catholic Church get more, I don't know, blatant or open about what they stood for? Or is it still kind of a, well, when I graduated from high school, gone from high school, they always have baccalaureate service, and the priest was the speaker, Catholic priest. And, he encouraged us to look to ourselves for our future, and look to ourselves for our salvation.
Good Catholic.
So, I mean, back then, did they say that too?
Both of, or the papers here, both of the time did.
Yeah.
He said anybody, paraphrase here, anybody that meant to say by salvation only.
By grace
damned.
alone, be damned, yeah. That has
And
been,
that still stands today. With
Yeah.
the papers.
fortunately, in 1969, at the Council of Vatican II, the church removed their stricture saying anyone who kills a Lutheran is not guilty of a mortal or venial sin. That stood for about 400 years. It is no longer legal in the Catholic Church to kill us. Which is nice.
Hi, Carol.
Good morning, Ron.
Any other questions or comments on what we've read? If you hear you're studying the Lutheran Confessions, that can sound a little intimidating, right? This so far is not. It gets deeper. But so far, this is the easy stuff. Anything here? Going once, going twice. Yep, all right. We'll pick it up here next week with at least Articles 3 and 4, possibly 5, which you should already have in your packets.
Did you get a packet last week?
Well.
After we
All right,
So we got through number 3
2.
today. 2. We didn't get through Article 2.
I
Article 2, third paragraph.
I got an article.
I've read